In this video, I'm going to explain how we make rubrics in Guidance Rubrics. Key topics I want you to understand is what is a rubric component and what is a rubric element, and how we use elements and components to combine them together to make a rubric. First, I'm going to just discuss a little bit about sort of our approach to rubrics and why we came up with that. So the first thing we tried in using AI to grade is make a prompt something like this. You would say, below is the student's answer to the question, and here's the question, something about the Louisiana Purchase, and then ask the LLM to grade the student, maybe on 0 to 10, or maybe some other sort of rubric ideas here, and then you follow that with the student's answer. So this approach, we couldn't get it to work after a large number of attempts. I think the basic problem is the LLM just doesn't have the context to understand what the student should answer. For example, the LLM wouldn't know what the student is supposed to have learned, right? Given what's presented in class, what should the student know? Because that's what the assessment is about. They also don't know what the level of the student is. It's very hard for LLM. LLM may have some general knowledge, but what is a freshman in American history is supposed to know? LLM wouldn't have that fine-grained information. Often when we're teaching, we are also teaching particular ways to attack problems, certain words that should be used, and certain frameworks to address a problem. And the LLM isn't going to know about this, again, fine-grained detail, which is important in the classes, but LLMs wouldn't have that knowledge or know the importance of those approaches. LLMs, of course, are not going to be able to distinguish between the layperson's answer and the expert answer. Again, are we teaching the students at a layperson level, or expert, or extreme expert, or is this a graduate class, or in introductory general education class? This information has to be somehow conveyed to the LLM, and the LLM might not be able to distinguish between those two kinds of information, or these kinds of information. LLMs also just get confused on very simple things, simple definitions. And sometimes, we teach things which are, maybe in a general education class, the topics we teach are actually very specialized. And the specialized classes, of course, that they are frequently very specialized. And the LLM just might not understand that. Also, LLMs have a very hard time in not accepting answers that are generated by an LLM. So we may try to ask the LLM to distinguish, use certain words and frameworks, but the LLM is very much going to prefer answers that are generated by LLMs. So we have gotten rid of this sort of high-level approach of saying just LLM did the student answer correctly, and we take a very different approach. So here's a question that we want the student to answer, something to ask about the Louisiana Purchase. So the answer we want as instructors should have multiple components. We call these components. So the answer should address all of these. That's what we're saying is the correct answer addresses all of these. And maybe a partial credit for addressing some of them. But the point is we can break what the answer should address these. So the LLM, we're going to ask the LLMs to check, did the student's answer address this point? Did the student's answer address this point? And so on, going through each of these. So these are the rubric components. Right? And full credit is given when all components are correctly answered. Now, LLMs shouldn't be too specific. It can be confusing. So here, when we say, does the student's submission address economic growth and development, do we really mean that they must address economic growth and, I guess, economic development? So it's a little bit vague. It doesn't say economic development. It says development in general. The LLM might get confused. I think what we mean is economic growth. The student's answer can discuss economic growth or economic development, either one of those. So we really should break it down into this kind of thing, where it's acceptable if the student's answer says economic growth or or economic development. So it uses Boolean expression. It's acceptable. This component is acceptably is addressed acceptably if either one of these is addressed. Even this is a little bit confusing because we have two concepts here. One is greatly expanded agricultural potential, and the other one is this economic issue. Right? So we have this economic growth and development, and that this was from agriculture. So we really should divide it into, to further subdivide it into an and. Does the statement say that agricultural the potential was expanded, and something about economic development? So now we have this Boolean like this. So to get full credit for this component, you have to mention that agriculture was developed and either one of these. So we have this sort of nested Boolean expression. So this is how we build components. Going further, it might be beneficial, it depends on the rubric, to also put another layer here. So now we have and, so three things need to be satisfied. This one, and this one, and this one. And this one we're saying, before you even evaluate it, make sure that some keywords are present. Words like either agriculture or farming. Either one of these is fine. So this can be very useful because requiring some keywords before even going into these more complicated prompts can make sure that the question is at least addressing the relevant thing. LMs can make mistakes if they're trying to answer a question and the student submission doesn't have any discussion about that. The LM really struggles in that case, trying to figure out if there's something related to agriculture when there's nothing related to agriculture at all. So instead of struggling with such situations, just immediately say, look, if the words agriculture and farming, right, if neither of them are present, or whatever other words you want to add here, if none of those are present, just don't even consider this area. And I think we do that in grading too. We quickly scan to see, okay, are some important words there? If they're not, we don't really try to read carefully if there's some sort of nuance where these concepts are there. Okay, so then these we call rubric elements, and this whole thing is a rubric component. All right, now let's go look at how we build rubrics in the tool that follows this format. Okay, I'm on the settings page. I've filled out the course that has the quiz, that has the question I want to make the rubric for, and I've already entered my Canvas access token and the Canvas server name. I want to point out, if you ever have a change in the question, then you need to reload the course, reselect the course so it can reload all the questions as well as reload all the students. So we save some of that information into cache locally in your browser. That will speed it up. So, okay, let's go to the rubric editor and try to make a rubric for that question. It says actually no quizzes have been enabled for auto grading. So that's right, we just made the quiz. So let's go into manage questions. Here's the quiz. Here's the question that we are going to make the rubric for, and we're going to select this for auto grading. Now we can go back to the rubric editor. It should load correctly. And there's our question. Okay, so here we see a place. This is the rubric components. Recall that for this question we had several components. I don't think I'm going to enter all of these, but we'll do a couple to get the feel. Actually, let's pick the first one. So I'll copy Louisiana purchase greatly expanded land area. I'll copy that text. Let's go back to, and we'll add a component. We'll put in the description of the component this text here. Then for a hint, this you can put whatever. Maybe we'll say recall. Oops. Right, so something like this. Maybe you can put a reference to the section of their learning material there. Okay, now here we'll put the rubric elements. So let's start with this one was it started with an and. Let's go down a few slides. We had an and like this. Now this is showing or here. Unfortunately, currently there's no way to switch this from to an and. Maybe we'll add that in the future. So what we can do instead is we'll add an and delete this. And now this is an or, but it's or of one element. So it really is just if this is satisfied or not. And then the and, we can put all these other elements. All right, and the first element, or set here, it was an or with 2. So we'll start with this by adding an or right here and delete. And let's see, I think probably want to put this one down further. Okay, so now we have the or here, and here we want to just include text. We have to include text. We were putting the text agriculture. And now add another rubric element. Again, include text. Farming. Okay, that's that. That's this first or. Next we have this one. And we just take this part. And this will be we'll use the query format. Query format, I usually use this format. You can put whatever you want here, but I usually use the format does the statement below mention something, and then I have a follow-up query. The reason is this: we need to know this answer has to be a yes or no. And if the LM says yes, the student gets credit. If it says no, the student doesn't get credit. Usually, this query by itself, the LM will respond with yes or no because we have a does. It should be a question mark there that can help. So it would usually respond with yes or no and then explain why, but doesn't always do that. So we need a follow-up query in case it doesn't answer with a yes or no, that we could say, please answer yes or no. So we need to include this follow-up query. So we can follow this format. Does the statement below mention that? Like that. Okay, and then put a question mark. And then for the follow-up query, yes, the statement does mention or no, does not mention. We'll talk about the chain of thought some other time. This option here, what it will do is that if we have it selected, then in the prompt, in the system part of the prompt, it first says that the question, where's the question text? Way up here. It says, it tells the LLM that is grading this question. So it's giving the LM a little bit more context, and then there's the prompt. So we can decide to add that context or not. It explains it when we put our mouse over there. Okay, so far what do we have? We have these ors, we have this and we want to put another or. So we can add, let's see, make sure we're all lined up here. This is under this and. We want to add this here, and we want to add an or. Again, this is take the query format. And does it mention that economic growth? Yes, it does mention economic growth. No, it does not mention economic growth. And then add another element to this OR, under this OR. Again, the format is query. And mention that spurred economic development. And that's it. Of course, spelling and formatting and grammar, unfortunately, is important in this area. Making prompts is a hard thing to do. This query format seems to work well with the current things. Here you can, we'll talk about other query elements in other videos. Here are the different models that you can use. These are updated as OpenAI adds models, and we're planning in the future to add more families besides OpenAI. All right, so then here we have the query. Let's just go through it. We have the OR here, and this is all under an AND with this, and then an ANDed with this. Okay, and then we can save this. And then save the whole rubric. This is just for one component. I guess we need to add another component. We had many components in this. Right, we also had more space for farming. Right, so we had another component. This would be, and so on, and add now the elements, the rubric elements for this component. Okay, and then we can add more components for that one I already did, this one. Okay, and then we can save each of these. Right, we didn't fill in the rubric elements here, so this would not work. It would asking if something about George Washington. That actually doesn't make any sense here. But let's suppose we did. Then finally we would save the rubric, and then we would deploy the rubric to get the grading going. And as we mentioned in other videos, you can deploy for testing, or you can deploy for which testing makes it that it doesn't impact the students' grades at all, but it does grade things, and it's available to analyze and view under the Student Submissions tab. Okay, and more of these features are discussed in other videos.